be honest, with the name Smokey and his eyes all scrunched up like that, it makes me think of a different kind of smoke. Hey, Wonderhussy here, camping out in the beautiful mountains of New Mexico, sort of near the town of Ruidoso, down in like, oh, I guess you'd call it southeast, south central New Mexico. Not far from Roswell, actually. But I'm up here in the mountains because, well, there's actually two reasons why I'm here. The first reason is somebody invited me down here on an acorn gathering mission. Okay, this arborist, I guess, was watching some of my YouTube videos. An arborist being someone who studies trees and cares for trees. Well, I guess he was impressed with my enthusiasm for trees and some of my bristlecone pine forest video, I think is one that he watched. And my enthusiasm for trees came through, so he invited me to join him on this acorn gathering mission down here. He's looking for acorns from certain species of oak trees that might be more conducive to a hot, dry climate, because the ones up in California are dying because of climate change. But anyway, that's just one reason why I'm here. The second reason I'm here is, well, when this person invited me down to Ruidoso to meet up, I jumped at the chance, even though it's like an 11-hour drive from Vegas, because I happened to drive through this part of the country earlier this summer, but I didn't have time to stop. Back in June, when I was driving to Arkansas to visit my girlfriend Gina, I remember passing through these mountains, and I went through the little town of Capitan, which is noteworthy as being, well, sort of the hometown of Smokey Bear. You know, only you can prevent forest fires, Smokey Bear. And by the way, it's Smokey Bear, not Smokey the Bear. First name Smokey, last name Bear, no middle name. I learned that from a friend of mine who's an ex-Forest Service firefighter. But anyways, when I was driving to Arkansas, I passed through these mountains and I passed through this little town of Capitan that's all about Smokey Bear. I mean, it's like Smokey Bear Boulevard runs through town, and there's a Smokey Bear motel, there's a Smokey Bear restaurant, there's a Smokey Bear grocery store. Everything in this little town is all about Smokey Bear. And I love tourist trap stuff like that. Plus, I love animals. And plus, who doesn't love Smokey Bear? I mean, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, I think we can all agree that Smokey Bear stands for something we can all agree on. Anyways, I didn't have time to stop because I was in a hurry to get to Arkansas, A, and B, there was terrible weather in the area. There was like tornado warnings coming in over the weather service and threats of golf ball size hail and all this horrible stuff going on, so I really couldn't stop, and it drove me nuts. Okay, that was back in June. And now it's mid-September. So what is that? 3.5 months. It's been wearing on me. And now I finally had the chance to come back. So I drove all the way out here to go acorn gathering and check out the birthplace of Smokey Bear. So I found this free campsite right outside town in the mountains. It's a great place to camp because, well, it's free. It's beautiful. And there's pretty good cell signal. So I was able to get some work done too while I was sitting here. But now it's time for me to go into town at long last and check out Smokey Bear Historical Park. Okay, I'm not really expecting too much from it. I mean, how much can you really say about one little bear? But you know what? Quite a bit, it turns out. I mean, since I had full cell signal here, I actually had a chance to do some research for a change last night, and I read all about the history of Smokey Bear, and it's actually super interesting. Okay, so the drawing of Smokey Bear, the cartoon, was come up with in the 40s because a lot of the Forest Service firefighters were off in World War II fighting in the war. So there weren't as many firefighters back home to put out the blazes. So they started this public awareness campaign to try to get people to maybe just be a little more careful about what they do when they're out in the forest. So the whole cartoon of him saying, "Only you can prevent forest fires," was come up with in the 40s. I'm not sure what year exactly the tagline came up. They came up with the tagline, but some ad agency came up with Smokey Bear in the 40s because all the firefighters were at war. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Another thing I thought was pretty interesting was forest fires were actually a real concern in World War II because the Japanese actually used fire balloons as a war tactic. I mean, they got these giant, I think they were helium or hydrogen balloons with bombs attached to them, and they just set like hundreds or thousands of them loose into the jet stream, which is an air current that blows, I guess, from Japan over the US. So they just set all these bombs basically tied to balloons into the jet stream, and they flew over the western US. I think some of them even got as far as Michigan. And in fact, they even killed 6 U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. They're the only 6 U.S. citizens to have died on U.S. soil in World War II. Really a sad story. Up in eastern Oregon, this Christian reverend and his wife and 5 Sunday school kids were out on a picnic, I think on a Sunday afternoon. And one of the Sunday school boys was like running around how kids do and went, "Oh, wow, look what I found." So they all went over to look at what he found. Well, it was one of the friggin' fire balloons, and it blew up in his face, and it killed the reverend's wife and all 5 of the kids. And they are the only 6 U.S. citizens to have died on U.S. soil in World War II. So I thought that was kind of an interesting fact. And it's sort of tied into this whole Smokey Bear thing because, well, I guess you could actually look at him kind of like a war hero in a way. I mean, he was trying to save Americans. But where Capitan New Mexico comes into all of this is in the spring of 1950, which is about, I think the Smokey Bear cartoon was invented in like 1944. So Smokey Bear had already been around for about 6 years at this point. There was a terrible wildfire down here. It was called the Capitan Gap Fire. It was named after this little notch in the mountains right outside Capitan called the Capitan Gap. Well, there was some horrible forest fire that blazed over, oh gosh, I don't even remember how many tens of thousands of acres. It was a bad fire. In fact, I think there was like 24 firefighters battling the blaze, and it got so bad that they actually had to bury themselves under a bunch of dirt from a landslide while the fire blazed over them. And they all survived. I mean, oh, talk about terrifying. But I guess while they were fighting that fire, they also noticed a little bear cub. There was this little orphaned bear cub that kept running back and forth into the forest, was like trying to figure out how to get away from the fire. And I guess they saw it. Eventually it climbed up a tree. This little bear cub climbed up a tree to get away from the fire. Well, after the fire passed over and all the firefighters dug themselves out of the landfill they were hiding under, they saw that little bear was still up in the tree. And so somehow they managed to get the poor little guy down and rescue him. And I guess they say he was only, gosh, I don't remember how old, like 3 months old or something. He only weighed 5 pounds. Oh, can you imagine how cute this little baby bear was? I mean, he was burned pretty badly from the fire, like his paws and his fur was singed. But all things considered, he was in remarkable shape for having survived this wildfire. So the forest fighters took him in and, well, long story short, he ended up becoming like a sort of a mascot for I think the State Department of Forestry here in New Mexico. And they ended up getting a hold of the Forest Service and I guess giving the bear cub to the Forest Service to make him the official live Smokey Bear. So from then, they flew this little bear cub from New Mexico all the way to Washington, D.C. I guess the plane had to stop overnight to refuel somewhere, and they even had like this private room set up for the bear at the local zoo. So they took really good care of this little bear cub, and he lived a very posh life at the zoo in Washington, D.C. He had a beautiful enclosure. You know, say what you will about zoos and how you feel about animals being closed up. From what I read online, he was taken very good care of. He had, water to play in. He had a magic tree that dispensed honey and berries whenever he wanted them. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, zoos are ethically dubious, but sounds to me like Smokey Bear hit the jackpot and ended up living a pretty sweet life. And regarding the whole Smokey Bear versus Smokey the Bear confusion, I guess it goes back quite a ways to I think that in the 50s, there was a song called Smokey the Bear, sung by Eddie Arnold, the famous Western crooner Eddie Arnold. Oh, love Eddie Arnold. But he sang this song called Smokey the Bear. Well, they put the word "the" in because I guess it fit the meter of the song better. And that's what started a lot of the confusion. In fact, there was even a little kid's book. Remember those little golden books? They even had a little golden book back then that was officially sanctioned by the Forest Service called Smokey the Bear. And in the book, Smokey himself says, "Hi, I'm Smokey the Bear." So don't feel dumb if you've been saying Smokey the Bear all this time like I have. Apparently you're not the only one. The Forest Service themselves are confused. So anyway, Smokey Bear, I think he lived at the zoo in DC for like, gosh, 30 years or something. He didn't die until 1976. Unfortunately, he never reproduced. They tried to get him to mate with this female bear they put in the enclosure with him, this female they called Goldie Bear. But for whatever reason, I mean, I don't know if they mated or not, but they never reproduced. So they got another orphan bear cub and put the little bear cub in with Goldie and Smokey and said that they adopted him. And so they made that Smokey Bear Jr. And so that Smokey Bear actually lived until 1990. I'm not sure if there's been any Smokey Bears since then, but I'm here to visit the grave site of the original Smokey Bear. That's right. When Smokey Bear died at the zoo in DC, they actually flew his body back here to New Mexico to Capitan, which is the closest town to where they found him. And they buried him in town at this Smokey Bear Historical Park. So I drove all this way to gather acorns and visit the grave of Smokey Bear. There might be something wrong with me. Anyway, I better get going, pack up the rest of my stuff, and drive down into town because, oh gosh, it's already afternoon and I got to meet my acorn gathering buddy before it gets dark. He got this Airbnb in Ruidoso, which isn't that far from here. So I got to go down into Capitan, check out the Smokey Bear Park, pay my respects at Smokey Bear's grave, and then head on. Okay, here we are in the little town of Capitan, New Mexico, home of Smokey Bear. Oh, well, I guess they have Smokey Bear days every year. Darn it, I probably just missed that. Probably in the summertime. Look how cute though. So you can see that the Smokey Bear Museum and gift shop are right there, but there's also a bunch of other Smokey Bear themed stuff. Like, look at across the street here. That's the Oso Grill. Oso means bear in Spanish. And look at the street sign. Even the name of the highway is Smokey Bear Boulevard. Man, they are all about Smokey Bear in this town. Oh, I guess I better watch this movie first. It's like an informative movie about Smokey Bear.
Smokey's story goes hand in hand with that in the forest.
Oh my god, look at all these old albums, like fire prevention music. I'd love to hear what Jerry Reed had to sing about forest fires. Okay, here's the best thing in this museum. It's all these rocks that have questions on them. And then you turn the rock over for the answer. Why was Smokey buried at 3 o'clock in the morning? Because they were scared his body would be stolen. My God, who would steal a dead bear's body? How old was Smokey when he died? 26. Look at this groovy 60s Smokey Bear poster. It's like something out of Yellow Submarine. Oh my god, apparently they have a Smokey koala in Australia. And Simon el Oso in Mexico. Okay, wow, that was a really cool museum. But it was so freaking quiet in there. It's hard for me to narrate because I didn't want to be obnoxious. When I was the only person in the museum, it's a Monday after Labor Day. And apparently there's no school kids here on a field trip. But aside from the museum, they have this little park you walk through. And this is where Smokey Bear's grave is. So I'm walking down this little boardwalk, which is going to take me to it. And along the way, there's all this beautiful native vegetation and all this helpful signage telling you what it is. These are all the different zones of New Mexico. This is a pinyon juniper woodland zone. So that's kind of like where I was camped last night, I think. And back there, there was like a little desert. I already passed it. I'm here for one thing and one thing only. Ain't got no time for wildlife zones. Here it is. Oh, look how cute. Oh, Smokey Bear. How cute. Okay, well, first of all, I don't know where exactly he's buried because it's a really big grave. But then again, he was probably a pretty big bear. Here's a little plaque. Let's see what it says. This is the resting place of the first living Smokey Bear. In 1950, when Smokey was a tiny cub, wildfire burned his forest home in the nearby Capitan Mountains of the Lincoln National Forest. Firefighters found the badly burned cub clinging to a blackened tree and saved his life. Oh, look, there's a little, I guess that's like his headstone there. The little American flag. Hey, listen, he was a true American patriot. Oh, I wish I had something with me to leave on his grave. I should have brought some honey or something, some berries. Oh, let's see what this sign says. Oh, wow, this sign has some really good information. Okay, well, first of all, it says he retired when he was 25 years old, which was 70 years old in human age, which was the age for mandatory retirement among humans. So I guess they made him retire. It's kind of funny. Then it says he died peacefully in his sleep of old age on November 9th, 1976. That's nice. They had all these different ideas of where to bury him, up in the mountains here, near where they found him, but they were afraid of vandals. So they decided to bury him here in town. And it says, although Smokey belongs to everyone, the people here in Capitan love him just a little bit more. And then it says, quietly, still suspect of vandals, his remains were flown to Albuquerque, driven to Capitan, and a respectful burial took place. It's like that rock inside it. They had to bury him at 3 in the morning so no vandals messed with him. Again, I can't imagine anybody wanting to vandalize a dead bear's corpse, but I guess you can't be too cautious. Aw, R.I.P. Smokey Bear. You know, your life started out rough, but you ended up having a pretty good deal, I'd say. And as far as final resting places go, I mean, look at this. I mean, this little park here is beautiful. They take really good care of it. Let's keep walking along the boardwalk. See what it looks like. There's some kind of life-size Smokey Bear around the corner we could take a picture with. Take one last look back at Smokey's grave. Aw, bye Smokey. Love you. Oh no, look at this. I think it's a memorial to firefighters, to Forest Service firefighters. Wow, that is super cool and super sad. Look at this. Oh man, dude, I have immense respect for what these forest firefighters do. I mean, I don't know if you watched my video that I made where I was actually caught in a forest fire up in Northern California earlier this summer. It was terrifying. This fire started in the middle of the night while we were camping in this forest, and everyone had to evacuate out onto a beach, and then the friggin' firefighters showed up in the middle of the night and drove straight into that blaze with chainsaws and hoses, and they just, you know, went to work attacking it so that we were all able to get out safely. But, you know, unfortunately, not all firefighters managed to. So, massive respect for what these guys do. These guys are really heroes. Oh gosh, and look at this. This is kind of interesting. This is the resting place of the first Smokey Bear balloon. Apparently, there was like a... Sorry about my shadow. There was like a big Smokey Bear hot air balloon that these people made. And it flew around, oh gosh, it looks like the first flight was in 1993, and it flew around balloon festivals until 2004. There was a terrible accident at 8:25 a.m. on October 10th, 2004 during the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. It crashed into a radio tower. Look at that. But it says the pilot, and there was 2 boys with him. They all managed to climb all the way down the radio tower to safety. Yikes. But that destroyed the balloon, and I guess they buried it here, just across the park from the actual Smokey Bear's grave, which is back there. But hey, look, let's check this out. Okay, I guess it's just a life-size photo op. So you can give Smokey a hug, or I suppose if you were of a mind to, you could put something funny in his hand or something, you know? Because it does look like, look, looks like he was meant to hold a flag or something. Look at his face though. To be honest, with the name Smokey and his eyes all scrunched up like that, it makes me think of a different kind of smoke. But what a cool statue. And look at his belt buckle. Smokey. Super cool. Better take a picture with him. Oh, that is too cute. This is actually a super fun, this reminds me of like one of those really classic old 1950s roadside attractions. You know, like when you would go on a family road trip in a station wagon with your parents and you would stop at stuff like this. You know, it feels like a slice of the past. But here it is, 2019, with all that's going on in the world, and places like this still exist. It's just a matter of getting out and finding them. Or in my case, it's a matter of driving past them and then agonizing about it for 3 months and then driving all the way back to visit them. Oh man, the only bummer is the gift shop is closed on Mondays. So I drove all this way and came here on a Monday and I can't buy any souvenirs. Oh well, I guess I could probably buy stuff online, but I don't know, it would have been nice to have a little something to remember Smokey by. But you know what? My gas tank is almost on empty, so I guess I can fill up at the local gas station and pay their exorbitant small town prices and take that as a souvenir. Okay, wow, that was easily, without question, the best $2 I've ever spent. That's right, they charge $2 to go into that museum and visit Smokey's grave. But, come on, $2? I'm cheap. And even I'm perfectly willing to shell out that kind of cheese. I've been known to shell out a lot more for Smokey. Okay, wow, that actually wasn't that expensive. I just got gas here in town and it was only $2.59, which is cheaper than it is in Vegas. So I had enough left over to get a Coke. Here's to you, Smokey Bear. This one's for you. Okay, now I gotta drive down to Ruidoso and get on this acorn gathering mission. Video coming soon. Stay tuned.